Hello everyone, in this video I will be talking about the umbrella pawn. What is an umbrella pawn? I would simply say that the umbrella pawn in chess means when you are using your opponent's pawn as a shield to protect your king, because we need to remember, right, our opponents, or we cannot capture our own pieces, right? So our opponents cannot capture their own pieces. So we can use that piece from our opponent as an advantage for us, as a protection, so that our king doesn't get any checks or something, and then we can continue on with our attack. So I will be showing you three positions. The first position is one that I created. Okay, I created this position. It's not realistic, but for the purposes of the teachings here, we'll go ahead with that. The second position will be from a blitz game from GothamChess, I guess 2550 rated opponent. And the third position is going to be an endgame, a more difficult one, but that's between two top grandmasters, right? Their ratings are above 2600s, 2650, 2660. So they're very strong grandmasters, an endgame position. So those are the three different positions that I will be showing you to learn about the umbrella pawn, right? So in this first position here that I created, we have an attack going, right? So we have an attack, we have a battery going on, we're ready to checkmate our opponent, right? But right now, this position is black to move. And I created so that we have this idea, and our opponent captures here our pawn on a2 with check. And something that we struggle a lot of times with is reacting to whatever happens. If we get checked, if we get someone captures our pieces, we automatically respond to that. And sometimes we need to think about it, right? We shouldn't just react to it by capturing back. Sometimes we're missing some in-between moves that can be more forceful, that can help us win the game. So in this position, our opponent just captured with their b3 pawn on a2. What would happen if we capture the pawn back with our king, reacting to it? If we capture back, our opponent, so the evaluation bar would go from winning with like +5, +6 or something to a draw. And if we don't make the right moves, we can even lose the game to force checkmate sequence. So here, if we were to capture and react to it, then our opponent has time to give us a bunch of checks. Bring in the rook, for example, here on b2. If we try to move, they sacrifice the rook. And then if we capture, they bring the other knight. And in this position, it will be a draw, unless we make the wrong moves, right? Let's say we try to escape, we're trying to find things out. If we step out, it's still a draw. But imagine here in this position, let me see if I can find the sequence here. So in this position, if after check, we go here, now this turns into a checkmate forceful. It's like mating 12, right? So here they would just give a check. If we capture back with the rook, another check, we bring the king in closer to the knight. Now the queen comes in, and then there's a rook, and then we were about to give a checkmate to our opponent, but now everything turned back against us. So here we would capture the knight probably. They give us a check, bring the king, rook there, and then that's just a checkmating one for the black pieces in that position. So we need to be careful with how we treat different things, right? So in this position here, the best approach would be to just use the a2 pawn from our opponent as an umbrella pawn, meaning that we just bring our king to, we bring our king to a1, okay? And that's the idea, right? They can never get through their own pawns. They would probably have to sacrifice some pieces, but imagine if the rook were to capture here because it's defended by the knight, now we're in time to just give a checkmate in one to our opponent, right? So that wouldn't really help them. And then after, so moving the king here, they probably have some responses like giving some breathing room to the king to escape. If we were to give a check, they can try to escape or so. But it's a little bit late if we're able to find the correct sequences and accurate sequences here, right? Because we have a check, the king tries to escape, we can capture with a knight because we have a discovery attack, attacking the queen and things like that. If they try to trade, at least gain something back. We can bring another knight, sacrifice. Also remember that the rook here is hanging. But if they capture here, we have this, and then we can capture the queen in the back, capture this rook and be winning, attacking the knight, and then coming with some checks at one point. Ideas like that. So now we'll be winning, and at one point we can capture this pawn back. Maybe not yet, maybe it's not super safe yet, but at least we got rid of our opponent's queen and some of the heavy pieces, so we can try to find a winning sequence from here on out, right? Because in this position currently, if we find the right sequences, we're at plus 4.8, plus 5 or so. So we're winning. We just need to be accurate still, right? For the second position, I would like to show you a game from GothamChess in a blitz time control, okay? So here, GothamChess just grab a pawn on a2 with the queen. If there was nothing there, it would just be checkmating 1, but he just grabbed a pawn here on a2. And the idea is that there's a background problem, right? If white doesn't do anything, let's say they just move a pawn, that's just checkmating 1. So here his opponent, a 25-56 rated opponent in blitz time control, move the bishop out of the way. Now, if you were to give a check, you can move the king, you can probably grab a pawn, things like that, right? But if you grab a pawn, maybe the rook can just move out of the way and no problem. So here, Gotham went with bishop b4. It's a nice move because now you are going to try to get back the exchange. Right now, his opponent is up the exchange, right? And you're gonna win it. Let's say what happens if rook here, maybe you have ideas of just capturing with the bishop, pawn takes, and then you win a pawn back in the end as well, which is super nice, right? And also the idea is like, what happens if the rook moves to b3, to d3, get it out of the way, right? Obviously you can just capture the rook here in the back on e1, but even better, if the rook moves here to b3, let's say, now the bishop is covering d2, which means that this is a background problem, and you would just give a check here with the queen, and that's actually checkmate. That's not just a check, it's a checkmate on a1, because the bishop is covering here d2. So in this position, his opponent went with g6, because if he moves the rook, right, it's gonna be checkmate. So his opponent went like, you know what, I'm just gonna lose the pawn or the rook anyways, I'm just gonna be kind of even material, and that's fine. But the idea is that he's trying to create some counterplay against GothamChess to maybe at one point bring the queen with some checks or ideas like that, right? Here, Gotham went with queen check on a1. The king moves to d2, and now he just grabs the pawn on b2, and the idea is that now you're creating a battery of some sort. If the queen never defends the rook here, you can just take a piece for free. So here, a forceful move, you have to always look into this one's g takes h7, right? G takes h7, it's a nice move. And if you were to capture the pawn, it's not too big of a deal, to be honest. You can capture it, it's not too bad. But at the same time, you're just making your opponent's pieces more active for no reason. As I mentioned in previous videos, sometimes we want to feel safe with what we move or how we play, how we approach things, because sometimes the computer, or oftentimes the computer, is very aggressive and it's careless about things like this. But as humans, we feel threatened from certain things, and we would like to feel safe with our playstyle, right? So here, a great idea would be to just move the king to h8 so that we prevent any sort of checks and we can continue with our attack. And you may have noticed that they are up the exchange, as I mentioned before. 2 rooks and a bishop, we have 1 rook, a knight, and a bishop. But in this position, after the whole sequence that Gotham was able to find, the position is minus 4.98, minus 5, which is very good, although we are down the exchange, right? But it's because of the amount of activity and the pins that are happening against the king, right? So in a position like this, Gotham decided to just go with king h8, using the h7 pawn as an umbrella pawn, a shield pawn, to protect himself and avoid any sort of checks and this, attacks like that, counter attacks. So here the attack continues. For example, if in this position his opponent resigned, like here after king h8, the opponent resigned. But let's find out why. And it's because now, if you would like to defend the rook, they're gonna capture, you capture back with the queen, things like that. The idea is that you don't even capture the rook yet. You try to make the most out of it. And it would be rook c8. And you may be thinking, oh, that could be a checkmate, right? Not really, because this rook is pinned to the king. So this rook cannot move at all. And now you're adding more attackers onto to attack certain squares. In this position, the critical square is c3. Sometimes we get too excited just grabbing the rook right away. But it's nice to suffocate your opponent in a way over the board, not in real life, over the board, by adding more pressure, because your opponent might crack at one point and then you can win the game easily. But that's a nice concept to think about. Here, the idea of moving the queen here to f3 is to bring more defenders to c3, because what happens if the queen just goes to e3? Now, after a move like rook c8, you're gonna win a piece, a clean piece up, no problem. The king has to move out of the way, and then you can even capture with the rook and things like that. It gets crazy. That's why the opponent had to find a move like queen f3 to, like, thinking ahead, bring the rook here to e3 and add more defenders to this c3 square. So here you can actually capture the rook with the rook. Rook captures, and the rook captures here. It's nice for us because we're keeping the pin. If the king ever moves out of the way, we can just capture this for free. So we'll be up material, up a piece, right? So here, after a move like this, now we can bring our knight in, because we're looking at the e4 square, right? And you will come with check. So a move here would be just, let's say, h6 to create some counterattack. Here we can just capture the pawn on h7, because if anything, we're getting discovered checks and things like that. So we can just capture this, especially because if the queen were to give us a check on d3, now we can just cover with the knight and then capture this anyway. Yes. So for example, let's say they try to create some counterattack to give us some checks and things like that. Here we can just bring the knight with check. If the queen captures, we will be up a queen and then win the rook anyways. So here the king would have to move out of the way. What happens if the king moves to d3? That would just bring queen takes, come in somehow and win the game, maybe with a checkmate idea here. And yeah, let's say if we go here, we have checkmate in 4, queen takes, and then just here, and we have queen e1 check, and then we have ideas of this, and then knight takes f2 check. The queen has to capture probably, after this, but then we have queen e4 checkmate. So ideas like that, we have ideas like that. So if our opponent plays it correctly though, they will just probably move the king out of the way and we will just be up a clean piece. Right here they can try to give us some checks, we can try to run away somehow, right? So just always never too late to blunder ideas, because if we go king g8, that's just checkmating 1. Always gotta be careful, always gotta be thinking. So here we would have to capture and then try to run away from everything somehow, maybe like bishop check, king f8, and then if check, you can try to run like king e7 and try to escape somehow. Okay, so that's the second position. Now on to the third position. The third position is between two grandmasters, one from Hungary, the other one from Macedonia, but also I think from Macedonia. He was playing for the Federation. All right, so it's an endgame position, the type of position that nobody likes, but it's okay. We need to learn them somehow, right? And we're gonna learn about the concept of an umbrella pawn in an endgame position with rooks. So this position is minus 5.73 if you find the right sequence, right? It's like minus 4, minus 5. You need to find right sequences. And it's funny because the computer, in the top 4 computer moves, the move that Zolt's able to find doesn't show, right? It's a little bit crazy, it doesn't show. But it's an amazing move. And in this position, you can try to pause the video and think about it. But it's an endgame position where the king is a little bit open, we are up a pawn, but sometimes that can also mean that's a draw with correct play, right? But we're not computers. So this position is winning in different sequences. But here, Zolt's able to find the move g4. G4 is an incredible move. Not the top choices from the computer, but as a human, like from a human perspective, it's a very cool move. Because here, the opponent went with rook g8, finding the right idea, right? And why? Here, Zolt went with king e3, and the opponent takes a pawn, of course, right? Now it's pawns, one pawn each side. It should be a draw, right? Somehow with correct play. So here, it's all about the pawn race, but at the same time, the black pieces were smart enough to use the h pawn to like take the g pawn, and now we're gonna be using that g pawn as a shield, as an umbrella pawn, meaning that the king now goes back to f4. If the king were to move to f1, now we use this pawn as an umbrella. The rook can never give us any checks. What would happen if the rook moves, in this case, like the opponent went with rook e8? What happens here if we grab the pawn on g4? Now this turns into a draw because the rook will always give checks to the king, and we can never hide here on f2. So now here we just messed up by grabbing the pawn. That's not a good move, because they can just give us checks and we have to move and then check and then move and check and move. That's it. Unlimited checks, and they can try to hold a draw in this position. But instead, we don't grab the pawn here. We go with moves. Let's see, after this here, we go with, okay, yeah. So here we hide our king, and we have to find ideas like rook d1. Rook d1 is a nice move, because what happens if, obviously they have to just find this move, right? Here is just rook e1, and then you just take, king takes, and now you bring your king to g2, and then there's nothing that can stop this promotion with check. And then you have time to come back and grab the other pawn if they start pushing this one, right? So things like that. Now, let's see. We have multiple ideas, because here, let's say, what happens if the king goes to e1 instead of rook e8, right? Because we just saw that line that would just give a check and then capture. So here, king e1, now we can give a check to the king, and there are two responses. What happens if the king goes to f1? If the king goes to f1, we have the idea of just like rook a2, and then we have ideas of check. The same idea now. They have to defend somehow, and then we just give a check, and then if they bring the rook, we can capture, bring the king to g2. Again, the same idea, right? But what happens if the king goes to d1? Now, if the king goes to d1, we have this idea with rook e7, and then blocking the whole file for the king. And now whenever the rook goes to f8, we're in time to push the pawn, and now bring our rook to just do promotion in this position, right? If the rook captures here, king captures, and you're in time to stop in this pawn, and then winning the endgame, rook, king versus rook. So here if they push, we just promote, takes, and we're in time to grab in this pawn at one point, right? So maybe some ideas like this, bring rook, capture the pawn, and then go for a checkmate with the king and rook. So this concept of just g4 and sacking a pawn, or just giving away a pawn, but to use it as a shield, it's a great idea, and hopefully that can help you for your games, because sometimes we just react right away, right? As I mentioned in the first exercise, we just react, and we need to take some time to think, is it good for me to just react and capture back, or do I have any in-between moves? Can I use some of my opponent's pieces as a shield so that I can continue with my attack, right? You need to like remember if they have any other checks or things like that, just use your opponent's pieces as a shield. That could probably help you sometimes for your games, and maybe you can start winning some games like that. Also, would like to remind you that on Tuesdays I am doing a live stream on Twitch and on YouTube at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time or Central Daylight Time. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the videos. Check out the shorts, check out the other chess concepts videos. I hope you're learning, I hope you're liking the content, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you.